Hi students, in this chapter we explore the relationship between the food we eat and the environment. How we grow our food has a significant impact on our environment. Additionally, since we depend on the environment to provide us with food and nutrition, our use or abuse of the environment can affect the quality and quantity of food we produce. Oh, and Cookie Monster says hi. He'll be helping us in this chapter. You may be wondering why a course in environmental science would cover agriculture and food policy. Good question. In fact, human use of land for growing crops and raising animals is one of the most significant land uses, and agriculture consumes approximately 25 to 30% of our total energy resources. So it is definitely a significant environmental concern. Let's see what we can learn about agriculture and its effect on the environment. There's a lot to cover, so let's go. In this part of our lecture on agriculture and food, you will be learning about chronic hunger and why hunger persists even in the face of enormous food surpluses in the world. We will also be learning about the risks associated with dietary deficiencies and learning about recommended nutrition profiles. Remember the old saying, you are what you eat. As Professor Einstein said, sometimes it takes new ways of thinking to get us out of our problems. While our current approach to food and agriculture has provided great benefits to society, there are also many problems with our food system. Let's see if you can come up with some new approaches. Before we get into the lecture material, let's take a few minutes to look at a real-life example of the effect of agricultural practices on humans and the environment. A soybean boom is sweeping across South America. Inexpensive land, the availability of new crop varieties, and government policies that favor agricultural expansion have made South America the fastest growing agricultural area in the world. The center of this rapid expansion is the Cerrado, a huge area of grassland and tropical forest stretching from Bolivia and Paraguay across the center of Brazil almost to the Atlantic Ocean. Biologically, this rolling expanse of grassland and tropical woodland is the richest savanna in the world, with at least 130,000 different plant and animal species, many of which are threatened by agricultural expansion. Until recently, the Cerrado, which is roughly equal in size to the American Midwest, was thought to be unsuitable for cultivation. Its rich, iron-red soils are highly acidic and poor in essential plant nutrients. Furthermore, the warm, humid climate harbors many destructive pests and pathogens. For hundreds of years, the Cerrado was primarily cattle country, with many poor quality pastures producing low livestock yields. In the past few decades, however, Brazilian farmers have learned that modest applications of lime and phosphorus can quadruple yields of soybeans, maize, cotton, and other valuable crops. Researchers have developed more than 40 varieties of soybeans, mostly through conventional breeding, but some created with molecular techniques, specially adapted for the soils and climate of the Cerrado. Until about 30 years ago, soybeans were a relatively minor crop in Brazil. Since 1975, however, the area planted with soy has quadrupled to 25 million hectares, or 62 million acres, or 80% of U.S. soy acreage in 2012. Brazil now competes with the United States as the world's top soy exporter, shipping some 36 million metric tons per year. Beef production has gone hand in hand with the soy boom. Brazil has long been an exporter of grass-fed beef, and the country's agricultural minister now aims to double beef exports. Clearing pasture also makes land available for sale to more lucrative soy operations, so that ranchers dramatically aid the transition from forest to crop field. Deforestation for cropland and pasture expansion is especially severe in the arc of destruction between the Cerrado and the Amazon. Small family farms are being gobbled up. Farm workers displaced by mechanization migrate to cities or cut out new clearings in the retreating forest margin. Increasing conflicts between poor farmers and big landowners have led to violent confrontations. Rapid growth of beef and soy production in Brazil have both positive and negative aspects. On the one hand, more protein-rich food is available to feed the world. On the other hand, the rapid expansion and mechanization of agriculture in Brazil is destroying globally important biodiversity and creating social conflicts. Brazilian agriculture represents one of the most dramatic cases of environmental change today. The Cerrado is a long way from Iowa and Illinois, in the heart of the U.S. Corn Belt, but farmers in those states would certainly recognize the changes in the soy fields of South America. Food production in the United States has been transformed from small-scale, diversified farms to vast operations of thousands of hectares growing one or two genetically modified crops with abundant inputs of fuel and fertilizer for the globally competitive market. These changes have dramatically increased production, lowered food prices, and provided affordable meat protein in developing countries from Brazil to China. Food production has increased so dramatically that we now use edible corn and sugar to run our cars. According to the International Monetary Fund, 2005 global food costs in inflation-adjusted dollars were the lowest ever recorded, less than 1/4 of the cost in the mid-1970s. In the United States and Europe, overproduction has driven prices low enough that we pay farmers billions of dollars each year to take land out of production. Despite these changes, food costs have risen recently, which spells disaster for the poorest populations. In general, global food supply problems have more to do with distribution than with supplies. We continue to produce surpluses, but hunger remains an urgent problem. 50 years ago, hunger was one of the world's most prominent, persistent problems. In 1960, nearly 60% of people in developing countries were chronically undernourished, and the world's population was increasing by more than 2% every year. Today, some conditions have changed dramatically, while others have changed very little. The world's population has more than doubled, from 3 billion to over 7 billion, but food production has risen even faster. While the average population growth in the past 50 years has been 1.7% per year, food production has increased by an average of 2.2% per year. Food availability has increased in most countries to well over 2,200 kilocalories, the amount generally considered necessary for a healthy and productive life. These figures show changes in dietary energy, or kilocalories, and protein consumption in selected regions. North America and other developed regions consume more calories and protein than are needed. Based on your review of these figures, which regions have seen the largest increase in calories? Which region or regions have seen the least amount of increase? This figure shows hunger around the world. Most severe and chronic hunger is in developing regions, especially sub-Saharan Africa. What other countries show high levels of hunger? This figure shows changes in the rate of malnourishment worldwide by region. While we were making progress, on a worldwide basis, 15% of the world's population continues to be malnourished. By my calculation, that is approximately 1.1 billion humans. Increasingly, we are coming to understand that food security, or the ability to obtain sufficient healthy food on a day-to-day basis, is a combined problem of economic, environmental, and social conditions. Even in wealthy countries such as the United States, millions lack a sufficient healthy diet. Poverty, job losses, lack of social services, and other factors lead to persistent hunger and an even more persistent poor nutrition, despite the fact that we have more cheaper food in terms of the work needed to acquire it than almost any society in history. Food security is important at multiple scales. In the poorest countries, Entire national economies can suffer from a severe drought, flood, or insect outbreak. Individual villages also suffer from a lack of food security. A bad crop year can devastate a family or a village, and local economies can collapse if farmers cannot produce enough to eat and sell. Even within families, there can be unequal food security. Males often get both the largest share and the most nutritious food, while women and children, who need food most, all too often get the poorest diet. At least 6 million children under 5 years old die every year of diseases exacerbated by hunger and malnutrition. Providing a healthy diet might eliminate as much as 60% of all child deaths worldwide. Famines are large-scale food shortages with widespread starvation and social disruption. Famines are often triggered by drought or floods, but root causes of severe food insecurity usually include political instability, such as wars that displace populations, removing villagers from their farms, or making farming too dangerous to work in the fields. Displaced farmers often have no choice but to migrate to the already overcrowded slums of major cities when they lose their land. Famines can lead to long-term disruption as people are forced to eat their seed grain and slaughter breeding livestock in a desperate attempt to keep themselves and their families alive. Even when better conditions return, they have often sacrificed their productive capacity and will take a long time to recover. Famines often trigger mass migrations to relief camps where people survive but cannot maintain a healthy and productive life. In this photograph, children wait for their daily ration of porridge at a feeding station in Somalia. When people are driven from their homes by hunger or war, social systems collapse, diseases spread rapidly, and the situation quickly becomes desperate. These food shortages result in devastating illnesses and death, as well as reduced mental capacity, developmental abnormalities, and stunted growth. As we can see in this slide, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, estimates that nearly 3 billion people, almost half the world's population, suffer from vitamin, mineral, or protein deficiencies. Malnourishment is a general term for nutritional imbalances caused by a lack of specific nutrients. In conditions of extreme food shortages, a lack of protein in young children can cause kwashiorkor, which is characterized by a bloated belly and discolored hair and skin. Kwashiorkor is a West African word meaning displaced child. A young child is displaced and deprived of nutritious breast milk when a new baby is born. Marasmus, from Greek to waste away, is another severe condition in children who lack both protein and calories. A child suffering from severe marasmus is generally thin and shriveled. These conditions lower resistance to disease and infections, and children may suffer permanent disabilities in mental as well as physical development. Iodine deficiencies can cause goiter, a swelling of the thyroid gland. Iodine is essential for synthesis of thyroxine, an endocrine hormone that regulates metabolism and brain development, among other things. The FAO estimates that 740 million people, mostly in Southeast Asia, suffer from iodine deficiency, including 177 million children whose development and growth have been stunted. Developed countries have largely eliminated this problem by adding iodine to our table salt. The best way to stay healthy is to eat lots of vegetables and grains, moderate amounts of eggs and dairy products, and sparing amounts of meat, oils, and processed foods. A solid base of regular exercise underpins an ideal diet outlined by Harvard dietitians. Modest amounts of fats are essential for healthy skin, cell function, and metabolism. But your body is not designed to process excessive amounts of fats or sugars. Unsaturated plant-based oils, such as olive oil, are recommended by dietitians. Trans fats, found in hydrogenated margarine, are not recommended. How does your diet compare with this idealized diet? Are you a conscientious eater, or are you a cookie monster? For the first time in history, there are probably more overweight people, more than 1 billion, than underweight people, about 850 million. This trend isn't limited to richer countries. Obesity is spreading around the world. Diseases once thought to afflict only wealthy nations, such as heart attack, stroke, and diabetes, are now becoming the most prevalent causes of death and disability everywhere. In the United States and increasingly in Europe, China, and developing countries, highly processed sugary, fatty foods have become a large part of our diet. Some 64% of adult Americans are overweight, up from 40% only a decade ago. Being overweight increases your risk of hypertension, diabetes, heart attacks, stroke, gallbladder disease, osteoarthritis, respiratory problems, and some cancers. Every year, about 400,000 people in the United States die from illnesses related to obesity. This number is approaching the number related to smoking, 435,000 annually. Paradoxically, food insecurity and poverty can contribute to obesity. In one study, more than half the women who reported not having enough to eat were overweight, compared with 1/3 of the food-secure women. A lack of time for cooking, limited access to healthy food choices, and ready availability of fast food snacks and calorie-laden soft drinks often lead to dangerous dietary imbalances for many people. Chronic obesity is a growing problem worldwide. In wealthier countries and many developed areas, the number overweight vastly exceed the number underweight. Reviewing this chart, which country has seen the greatest increase in obesity from 1960 to 2010? Most strategies for reducing world hunger have to do with increasing efficiency of farm production, expanding use of fertilizers and improved seeds, and converting more unused land or forest to agriculture. But the prevalence of obesity and unstable farm economies suggest that lack of supply is not necessarily the principal cause of world hunger. An overabundance of food supplies in much of the world suggests that answers to global hunger may lie in better use and distribution of food resources. For most farmers in the developed world, overproduction constantly threatens prices for farm products. To reduce food supplies and stabilize prices in the United States, Canada, and Europe, we send millions of tons of food aid to developing areas every year. Often, however, these shipments of free food destabilize farm economies in receiving areas. Prices for local farm products collapse, and political corruption can expand if warlords control distribution. Even in developing areas, lack of food production is not always the cause of hunger. There are also inefficiencies in food use. Global food waste amounts to some 30% of all food production, 1.3 billion tons annually, as food is spoiled in storage and transit, used inefficiently, or thrown away after preparation. We also prefer inefficient foods, particularly meats that require 4 to 10 times as much animal feed as is produced in meat. Food prices declined again after 2008, but they were shored up by additional change. New policies in the United States and Europe promoting biofuels. Using crops such as soy, corn, palm oil, or sugarcane to drive our cars is an important strategy for supporting farm economies in wealthy countries, as the increased demand keeps prices high. In the United States, federal ethanol subsidies led to a doubling of corn prices in 2007. But in developing countries, production of soy, palm oil, and other products for export often displaces food production. When biofuel policies compete with food supplies in Asia and Africa, the efficiency of this market becomes less clear. The problem of farmland availability has always been a central question in debates about how to feed the world. Because we currently produce more than enough food to feed the world, we probably do have enough farmland to feed more people than currently live on Earth, if we ate according to the recommendations in Figure 7.7, and if we used all farm products for food rather than fuel and livestock feed. Could we expand production further by clearing new farmlands This is harder. Tropical soils often are deeply weathered and infertile, so they make poor farmland unless expensive inputs of lime and fertilizer are added. Much of the world's uncultivated land is too steep, sandy, waterlogged, salty, acidic, cold, dry, or nutrient poor for most crops. About 11% of the Earth's land area, some 1,400 million hectares, is used for agricultural production. This land area amounts to about zero point 0.2 hectares per person. 1 hectare equals 100 meters by 100 meters. Arable land per person has fallen from about 0.5 hectares per person in 1960, mainly because of population growth. Population projections suggest that we will have about 0.15 hectares by 2050. In Asia, cropland will be even more scarce, 0.09 hectares per person by 2050. Much of the world's uncultivated land could potentially be converted to cropland, but this land currently provides essential ecological services on which farmers depend. Forested watersheds help maintain stream flow, regulate climate, and provide refuge for biological and cultural diversity. Wetlands also regulate water supplies, and forests and grasslands support insect pollinators that ensure productive crops. In this lecture, we have learned about the number and extent of hunger and malnutrition. Over 1 billion people experience hunger on a daily basis, and 3 times that number suffer from some level of malnutrition. This is the result of many factors, including political instability, climate change, and uneven availability or distribution of food. There are health risks associated with undernourishment, but also with eating a poor diet and even with overeating. Can you list out some of these risks?